Look at the back of your legs for a moment. Those blue or purple lines that seem to rise just under the skin, maybe they weren't always there. Maybe they appeared slowly, year after year, until one day you realized they had become part of your everyday life. By evening, your legs feel heavier than they should. Not exactly pain, but a deep, tired sensation that doesn't fully go away, even after you sit down. Most people are told this is simply part of getting older. Others believe it's just weak veins or something they inherited. And once that idea settles in, it feels like there's nothing you can really do except accept it or look for a procedure later on. But what if that explanation isn't the full picture? Because in many cases, what you're seeing on the surface is not where the problem actually begins. It's not just about the vein walls, and it's not simply about age. There is a deeper mechanism at work, one that builds quietly over time and follows a very specific pattern. Once you understand what's really happening inside those veins, the symptoms start to make sense in a completely different way. And more importantly, it opens the door to simple actions that may help your legs feel lighter and more comfortable again, starting sooner than you might expect. For many people, the explanation seems straightforward. They are told these veins run in the family, or that years of standing, walking, or working on their feet have finally caught up with them. It sounds reasonable, so the conclusion feels final, nothing to change, nothing to question. Over time, another idea is often introduced. If the veins become more visible or uncomfortable, the next step is usually a procedure. You may hear about injections, laser treatments, or other methods designed to reduce their appearance. These options can sound reassuring because they promise a visible improvement. But here's where the confusion begins. If the cause is truly genetic or simply the result of standing, why do the same patterns continue even after treatment? Why do some veins return or new ones appear over time? These are questions many people quietly notice but rarely get clear answers to. The reason is subtle but important. Most of these approaches focus on what can be seen from the outside. They aim to improve how the veins look, but they may not fully address what is happening within the system that led to the change in the first place. This creates a gap between expectation and experience. Something is being done, yet the underlying pattern may still be there, continuing in the background. And until that deeper process is understood, it's difficult to know what your body actually needs. To really understand what is happening, you need to look inside the veins themselves. Every vein in your legs contains a series of tiny one-way valves. These valves are designed to keep blood moving upward, back toward your heart. When everything is working properly, blood flows up in small steps. A valve opens to let blood pass, then closes to prevent it from slipping backward. This system is especially important in the legs, where blood has to move against gravity for most of the day. Now imagine what happens when these valves no longer close as tightly as they should. It doesn't fail all at once. Instead, it begins gradually. The valve still opens, but when it tries to close, a small gap remains. At first, the change is subtle. A small amount of blood moves upward, then some of it falls back down again. Over time, this backward movement starts to accumulate. Blood begins to pool in certain sections of the vein instead of continuing its path upward. As more blood collects, pressure inside that part of the vein increases. This pressure is constant, building slowly throughout the day, especially when you are standing or sitting with your legs down. The vein wall, which is made of living, flexible tissue, responds to that pressure in the only way it can. It stretches. It expands slightly at first, then more over time. What you eventually see on the surface, those visible, enlarged veins, is the result of that ongoing pressure from within. This is the key point that changes everything. The visible vein is not where the problem begins, it is where the process ends up. The real issue starts with how blood is moving, or not moving efficiently, through the system. Once you see it this way, the pattern becomes clear. It's not random, and it's not just about aging or appearance. It's about flow, direction, and pressure. And when those three elements are out of balance, the body adapts in a way that becomes visible over time. Understanding this mechanism gives you a completely different perspective. Instead of focusing only on what you can see, you begin to think about how to support the movement of blood itself. And that shift is what opens the door to more practical, everyday ways of improving how your legs feel and function. Now that you understand how the valves work, the next question is simple. Why do they begin to weaken in the first place? In most cases, it's not a single cause, but a combination of three gradual pressures that build over time. The first is gravity. Every hour you spend standing or sitting with your legs below your heart places a steady load on your veins. Blood naturally wants to move downward, and your valves are constantly working to push it back up. For short periods, this is not a problem. But over many years, that continuous pressure can slowly reduce how tightly those valves close. It's not something you feel right away, but the effect adds up day after day. The second factor is the natural change in collagen as you get older. Collagen is the structural material that gives strength and flexibility to your vein walls and the valves inside them. As the body produces less of it over time, these structures may become thinner and less resilient. When that happens, the valves may not return to a fully closed position as easily as before, allowing small amounts of blood to move in the wrong direction. The third factor comes from pressure inside the abdomen. Activities or conditions that increase this pressure, such as frequent straining, persistent coughing, or carrying extra weight around the midsection, can push downward on the veins in your legs. Each time this happens, it adds an extra load to the system, making it harder for blood to move upward efficiently. When these three forces combine gravity, reduced structural support, and added internal pressure, the valves face more stress than they were designed to handle. Over time, this can lead to the gradual changes that eventually become visible on the surface. Before going further, it's important to understand that not every case of leg vein changes should be handled the same way. In many situations, what you're seeing develops gradually and follows a predictable pattern, but there are certain signs that should not be ignored, because they may point to something that needs prompt medical attention. One of the most important signs is swelling that appears suddenly in only one leg. If one side becomes noticeably larger within a short period of time, especially if it feels different from the other side, this is not something to monitor casually. It's a signal that should be evaluated as soon as possible. Another situation to watch for is when discomfort is combined with redness and warmth in a specific area. If the skin over a vein becomes tender to the touch and looks inflamed, it may indicate irritation within the vessel. This type of change is different from the usual feeling of heaviness and should be taken seriously. There is also a more advanced pattern where the skin near the ankle becomes fragile, discolored, or develops an open sore that is slow to heal. This reflects a long-term strain on the circulation in that area and requires proper care. The goal here is not to create concern, but to provide clarity. If your symptoms are gradual, similar on both legs, and improve with rest or movement, they often follow a common pattern. But if they are sudden, uneven, or come with visible skin changes, it's important to seek professional guidance so you can address the situation appropriately. There are also a few everyday habits that can quietly make this situation worse over time, even though they seem harmless in the moment. The first is sitting with your legs crossed or kept in a bent position for long periods. When your knee stays folded, it can partially restrict the flow of blood moving back up your leg. For a few minutes, this isn't a concern, but when it becomes a regular habit for hours each day, it creates a small but repeated buildup of pressure below that point. The second habit is prolonged exposure to heat, especially from hot baths or long showers. Warm water helps muscles relax, which is why it feels so good at the end of the day. But heat also causes your veins to expand. When veins stay in a widened state for too long, the valves inside them may not close as effectively. Over time, this can make it easier for blood to settle instead of moving upward as it should. The third factor is something many people rarely consider: low intake of certain plant compounds often referred to as flavonoids. These natural substances, found in foods like berries, citrus, and certain grains, help support the structure of blood vessels. When they are lacking in your daily diet, the vessels may become more sensitive to pressure and less capable of maintaining their normal function. Individually, each of these habits may seem minor, but together, repeated day after day, they can gradually influence how your veins handle pressure and flow. Becoming aware of them is often the first step toward making small adjustments that support better balance over time. Alongside daily habits, simple nutrition choices can provide steady support for how your veins function over time. You don't need anything complicated, just a few consistent additions that help reinforce the system from within. One of the most helpful foods is buckwheat. It naturally contains a compound called rutin, which is known for supporting the structure of blood vessels. Rutin helps maintain the strength and flexibility of the vein walls, allowing them to handle pressure more effectively. Adding buckwheat a few times a week, whether as a warm grain or mixed into meals, is a simple way to include it. Another often overlooked source is the white inner layer of citrus fruits, sometimes called the pith. When people peel an orange or lemon, they usually remove this part, even though it contains valuable compounds like diosmin and hesperidin. These are associated with supporting healthy circulation and vessel tone. Keeping a bit of that inner layer when you eat citrus can make a small but meaningful difference over time. Tart cherries are also worth mentioning. Their deep color comes from natural compounds that help support tissue balance and reduce everyday strain on the vascular system. A small serving, whether fresh, frozen, or in a simple concentrate, can easily fit into your routine. None of these foods act instantly, but together they create a supportive environment that helps your body manage pressure and flow more efficiently. A while ago, I spoke with a woman I'll call Margaret. She was in her mid-60s and had been dealing with visible veins in her legs for years. At first, they were just a cosmetic concern. But over time, her legs began to feel heavier by the end of the day, and the veins became more noticeable. Eventually, she reached a point where she started looking into procedures. She had already scheduled a consultation and was seriously considering moving forward. Margaret had done everything she thought was right. She tried to stay active, paid attention to her diet, and followed general advice she had heard over the years. Still, the pattern didn't change. By evening, her legs felt tired and slightly swollen, and the discomfort made her think that a procedure might be the only real solution. During our conversation, one detail stood out. On days when she was more mobile, walking more often, changing positions, and not sitting for long stretches, she noticed her legs felt lighter. It wasn't dramatic, but it was consistent enough to raise a question. What if the issue wasn't just structural, but also related to how her body was managing movement and flow throughout the day? Instead of rushing into a procedure, she decided to try a simple routine first. Nothing extreme, just small, regular actions. Gentle movement breaks, short walks, and a brief period each evening where she elevated her legs and allowed her body to reset after a full day upright. Within the first couple of weeks, Margaret noticed subtle changes. The heaviness in her legs didn't build as quickly during the day. The marks on her skin faded sooner. By the end of the first month, she felt more comfortable overall, especially in the evening hours when symptoms used to peak. What mattered most was not just the visible change, but how she felt. Her legs were less fatigued, and she felt more in control of what was happening in her body. The decision about a procedure became less urgent. She chose to continue with the routine, giving her body time to respond. Margaret's experience highlights something important. Sometimes the body doesn't need a drastic solution right away. It needs consistent support in the right areas. And when those small adjustments align with how the system actually works, the results can be more noticeable than expected. If there is one part to focus on, it's this simple daily routine. It doesn't require special equipment, and it doesn't take much time. But when done consistently, it supports how your veins handle flow and pressure throughout the day. The key is not intensity, but timing and repetition. Start in the morning. Before you move into your normal routine, stand with your feet flat on the floor. Slowly rise up onto your toes, lifting your heels as high as is comfortable, then lower them back down in a controlled motion. Repeat this about 30 times. This small action activates the deep calf muscles, which act like a natural pump for your veins. After a night of lying still, this helps re-engage circulation before gravity begins to pull blood downward again. During the day, the goal is to avoid long, uninterrupted periods of stillness. If you find yourself sitting for extended periods, take a short break every 30 to 60 minutes. You don't need to leave the room, just add a few simple movements. Rotate your ankles in slow circles, then lift your heels or toes a few times while seated or standing. These movements may seem minor, but they create gentle pressure that encourages blood to keep moving upward instead of settling in one place. If your day involves standing for long stretches, the same idea applies. Shift your weight, rise slightly onto your toes, or take a few steps whenever possible. The goal is to keep the system active, not to let it remain idle for too long. In the evening, this is where you can make the biggest difference. About an hour before bed, lie down and elevate your legs so your heels are higher than your hips. You can rest them against a wall, over the back of a couch, or on a firm pillow. Stay in this position for about 15 to 20 minutes. During this time, gravity works in your favor, allowing fluid and blood that have collected in your lower legs to move back toward your upper body with less resistance. While your legs are elevated, you can add gentle ankle movements, small circles, or flexing motions to further support circulation. Keep your breathing slow and relaxed. This is not an exercise session. It's a reset for your system after a full day upright. Afterward, when you stand up, you may notice a sense of lightness in your legs. To complete the routine, finish your shower with a brief period of cooler water over your legs. It doesn't need to be extreme, just enough to create a mild contrast. This helps the veins return to a more neutral state after being expanded throughout the day. What makes this routine effective is not any single step, but how they work together. You activate the system in the morning, support it during the day, and reset it in the evening. When practiced regularly, these small actions can help your body manage flow more efficiently, reducing that heavy, tired feeling that tends to build over time. When you follow this routine consistently, the changes tend to build gradually but noticeably. In the first 1 to 2 weeks, many people report that the heavy feeling in their legs starts to ease, especially in the evenings. The deep sock marks may fade faster, and the sense of pressure becomes less persistent. By weeks 3 to 4, the difference is often more visible. Veins may appear less prominent, and overall comfort improves throughout the day. Over a longer period, around 6 to 8 weeks, these small improvements can add up to a meaningful shift in how your legs look and feel. The key factor here is consistency. This is not about quick fixes or temporary results, but about supporting your body daily so it can function more efficiently over time. Even a few minutes each day can make a difference when done regularly. If this helped you understand your body in a new way, try applying the routine tonight and observe how you feel over the next few weeks. You can also share this with someone who might benefit from it.